You're listening to another ambitious entrepreneurnetwork.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
Welcome to Industry Thought Leader Podcast. Stand out, be heard, influence. Want to influence real change with your message while become known as an authority in your field? Industry Thought Leader Podcast will show you how. Now, over to your host, Anne-Marie Cross.
And welcome to another episode of Industry Thought Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross, known as the Podcasting Queen, and this show is brought to you by Podcasting with Purpose, helping you to stand out, be heard, become that influential voice in your industry with a podcast. Now, my guest today says people don't pay for content, they pay for packaging. And joining me on today's show is Robin Farmanfarmaian, and she is a professional speaker. She is an author and an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, and she works on the cutting edge technology and building thought leadership for others. So I couldn't think of anyone better to come on the show to talk all about thought leadership today. Now, specifically, Robin's going to share how thought leadership can be a tool to fight bias in the workplace, how thought leadership can help you advance your career, whether you're working in business or for someone else, as well as some basic instructions on how to build a thought leader foundation for yourself in order to help you drive your business and your career goals in 2020 and beyond. So welcome to the show, Robin.
I am so excited to be here. When I found you online, I was just like, wait a second, this woman thinks just like I do. I love it.
Yes. So one of the things that you sent me, and I wanted to just to give people a heads up about this, you're talking about a lot of the points that you cover in your book called the Thought Leader Formula, strategically leverage your expertise to drive business and career goals. And one of the things that you talk about in your book, which I'm sure people are aware of and have heard others speak about, is this term, the changing world of work. And here in Australia, I'm sure in the US and even in other countries too, they're talking about how in the future, many of the jobs that we now know exist won't exist in the future. Yeah. And in actual fact, some of my colleagues who are futurists are saying, you know what, things are changing so quickly, we don't even want to start predicting anything because change happens so quickly. So when we're thinking about building reputation, building thought leadership, there are a lot of things that we now need to navigate to ensure that we do position ourselves. So tell us a little bit about what you're hearing and seeing around the world of work and that it's changing.
Sure. So we're starting to see a lot of kind of low level and very high level tasks being outsourced to software, right? So there's a company called IDX that has clinical approval with the FDA, which is here in the United States, for being able to diagnose diabetic retinopathy without the presence of a physician. That's a really big deal because a physician at that level is extremely highly paid. They're not replacing everything to do with that physician, but just one task. But that's kind of a general kind of thing that we're seeing. So it's really about understanding what is going to be easily replaced, repetitive tasks and things like that, and what is going to be born. For instance, like the drone industry, it's brand new, right? It's just a few years old, and all of a sudden it's going to start exploding. I know in Australia, Google Wing did a prototype for about 3 years, and where it was delivering just regular consumer goods to people in the town.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think sometimes, when we think about the days gone by, we say to children, what do you want to be when you grow up? Hopefully that conversation is changing. My children are all in their adulthood now, but we don't even imagine what could happen as far as technology and other things which may not even have been created yet. So what would you say then? I mean, you're obviously in Silicon Valley. What are some of the triggers or the things that you keep an eye out for that you would suggest, in different industries? One of the things, and I'll share this, one of the reports that a colleague just recently shared, and she listened to Cisco, just to start to share a little bit more about some of the trends in service-based, like helpers, they will increase because here in Australia, we've got an aging population. Now, technology is not really going to look after people where you have to help them them, just do normal day-to-day things. So what are some things people can start to look out for to kind of give them a bit of a determination? Well, this is an industry that is going to increase. What sort of
So absolutely anything that requires hands-on. If you can't imagine a robot being able to easily do it over the next 5 years, then that's a job that's not going to be going away. Things like nursing, that is huge because they have to do so much more than just, data operation, right? And so anything that's hands-on that a human being needs to use both their hands for, but also their creativity.
Yes.
Right? Because AI is not able to do that yet.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that in because, sometimes we hear of people that are talking about, well, that industry is no longer, and this has been disrupted. Here in Australia, there were, a lot of strikes when the taxi industry, who are probably the same in the US too, spent tens of thousands, if not more, to buy licenses for taxis. And all of a sudden, Uber came to the forefront. And we hear of these, examples in different industries as well. But one of the things that you've identified is really looking and asking yourself, where can, AI not replace? So that human touch. And I think there are, when we start to look at all of the things that are disappearing and we focus so much on that, we forget to look and investigate, well, what are some areas that we can bring our real expertise, our real, the human factor around to be able to make that difference and start positioning ourselves so that we can't be replaceable, even if, technology starts to do that. And that, of course, is where thought leadership comes in. So define for me, if you will, what does thought leadership mean to you?
So it's really just being known as an industry expert in your particular vertical by that industry. So your peers or your colleagues or other companies and competitors in that particular world.
Yes. I'm glad that that's exactly how I think of thought leadership too. And it's interesting because, you hear a lot of discussions going on and, people were talking about, personal branding, positioning, thought leadership. But really, if you've got a body of knowledge, and this is what you share in your book as well, if you've got a really solid body of knowledge and experience, hands-on experience that you can't really get from books because you've been hands-on. And so often we develop a level of awareness that only experience can provide. And if we wrap that up, we position it in such a way that it fulfills a need, it answers a problem, provides a real solution that people are looking for, then people will automatically start to look at you as someone who's leading the way, who's got some expertise and information and support that's going to help them solve the problem. So, often I think as what, let's just call it thought leaders, they don't set out to be thought leaders. They're just doing what they love to do, and people start to label them. But I love the way that you've put this book together because there's some steps that you can take and do consistently that you can position yourself as someone who starts to be looked up to. So let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit around building thought leadership first as a way to fight bias in the workplace. And I believe you've got a bit of a story around that too. So perhaps share your story and then share how we can use thought leadership to overcome bias in the workplace.
So becoming a thought leader and a professional speaker, for me, one of the main reasons I did that is because of the amount of bias I faced. I'm a petite female in Silicon Valley where the vast majority, especially of upper management, are men. And so I learned early on in my career, I was being sabotaged, sexually abused, regularly abused, emotionally, like everything that you could think of was going on. And it wasn't everyone, it was just, a couple of men, but they can make your life kind of miserable. So I realized you can't fight this directly. That just usually doesn't work. A lot of the time the woman gets hurt more and the man is more powerful. So I said, you know what? I'm going to change the game. I'm going to turn myself into a professional speaker, and then they're not going to be able to touch me. And it'll be a kind of a safety net. And let me tell you, the day my first book published, it was like flipping a light switch on the bias. Absolutely. Now, all of a sudden, I've always got like a place at the table. I've not been sabotaged since then, or pushed down, or talked over, and none of my work has been stolen from me, which is what used to happen a lot. And so now I really want to make sure that other women, or not just women, I mean, there's a lot of us that have faced bias or bullying or abuse in the workplace. I want to help other people overcome that.
Yes, I love that. I love that. So, if you are experiencing bias, follow the steps that Robin is about to share, and you'll certainly flip the switch in that as well. And of course, building that thought leadership now has really helped you advance your career. As you've said, you've now got a seat at the table. I'm sure you've had opportunities to share your knowledge on multiple stages, and that reputation really starts to follow you, and then people want to tap into that knowledge. Let's dive into some of the how-tos. I love that, the how-tos, how to build your thought leader foundation for yourself in order to drive your business and career goals. Where should people start when it comes to building this foundation?
So first I say, okay, look at your overall goal and your business model, because you need to understand why you're doing that. Maybe you are an expert in, say, butterflies, and that's like a huge passion area of yours, and you could easily be a thought leader in that. But if your day job is being an engineer and that's where your revenue streams are coming in, we really need to build your thought leadership around that engineering part. And let me tell you why, is because nobody pays you necessarily to be a thought leader. Right? You're not going to get paid for a lot of articles, and some of us can get paid as speakers, professional speakers, but even then you're looking at it and it's like ebb and flow, right? You can't guarantee that you're going to make $50 or $100 or $200,000 a year doing something like that. So what is your day job? What is this actually driving? Right. And so once you figure that out and where your revenue streams are coming from, and when I say your revenue streams, it could be your full-time salary.
Yes.
Right. And so how is that going to help you? So, once you've figured that out, the next step is to really come up with your fundamental truth. And that for me is your foundation of your thought leadership platform. A fundamental truth, meaning what do you believe that other people may not be aware of yet or don't believe themselves?
Yes, yes. Do you find that is an area that many people struggle with? Because in my, conversations with people, that is going deep, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I would imagine that if people haven't clearly clarified that yet, it impacts everything moving forward. The message, self-confidence, because if you're not clear, how can you clearly communicate that to others? What are some things that people can start to consider or even start journaling around to help them define what that is for themselves?
Sure. So the way I kind of went about it is my first book and platform is called The Patient as CEO, and it's how technology empowers the healthcare consumer. And so the way I came up with that title is it came back down to my why and why I wrote that particular book. It's because I'm a chronic disease patient, and I had a total of 43 hospitalizations, 6 major surgeries, and 3 organs removed for a misdiagnosis. I took control of my healthcare team, fired my current one and replaced it, and it saved my life. And so for me, that's both my why and my fundamental truth. My fundamental truth being the patient is the CEO of the healthcare team. And I believe that. I walk that walk. I live that truth. And it's something that the majority of the world is not up on yet, right? When I go to Japan or Germany, their mouths drop open because these countries, there's such a paternalistic healthcare system that when you go into the doctor, they kind of tell you what to do and you say, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, and then you go and do it. And so saying the patient is the CEO of the healthcare team is a massive change for most people.
Yeah, I love that. Also, if you think back to when you were determining that for yourself, I'd imagine that you were able to share your personal story, because that's, obviously what I often say, it's something you're passionate about, but something that pees you off, because both of those is really what you stand for, as you say, your fundamental truth. But you were also able to tie it to some aspect of your work. There has to be a tie, doesn't there, so that people can see that it's a natural progression.
Yes.
Was that clear to you too? And I'm asking you that because many people think, well, I'm passionate about this pees me off. But then when we look at it, it's very hard to segue a direct kind of relevance to their role. Speak a little bit more about that, if you would.
Sure. So it's always about working backwards. So we came up with that goal and your business model, where your revenue streams are, and then thinking about your why and your fundamental truth as it relates to that. Only because I say keep that in mind, because most people have 40 different whys, right? Or they have like 20 different fundamental truths. So kind of reverse engineering it to get to that.
Yes, yes. And one of the things that I often do will mind map. I'll get it in front of me and plot out. As you say, start with the end in mind. I love that reverse engineer. And then do a couple, because the more you, and then let it sit. You know, so often I'll make out a plan, I'll let it sit, and in the morning I'll have fresh ideas. So it really is, before you even put pen to paper and start printing your book, map it out, map out a number of different scenarios, and then often the clear pathway will present itself. I'm sure that that's what you did as well.
That, and don't be afraid to bring on help. So that's another big thing, is that you're building a company. A thought leader, while yes, it's a person and it's a brand, that brand is a company. And it's there as a tool to drive your business and your career, right? So starting to think about the fact that, okay, if you're a company, you need to hire people sometimes. You might need to bring on a consultant coach, or a speaker coach, or somebody who can teach you something. It's really about getting yourself educated or outsourcing things that you aren't necessarily best at. And so like, I coach people, but I know a lot of other coaches who, I'll get on the phone with someone and I will be able to tell them their fundamental truth and their why in 5 minutes flat.
Yes.
Right. Because I'm an expert at knowing how to find that, and I can see it. And so sometimes all it is, like for my book, the second book, The Thought Leader Formula, coming up with that subtitle was so hard. I went through a list of 40 different subtitles. All I did finally was get on the phone with my friend Monica, and within 3 minutes we talked it through and came up with the perfect one.
Yeah. So often the case, isn't it? Because we're stuck in our story, we're stuck in the process, and we can come up with something. We think this is it, and we tell someone that we trust, and they go, keep digging, and it's often just around the corner. That's fabulous. So you're creating this. What would be the next step that you? And obviously, you're creating your idea, having that clarity, getting people aside, alongside you to support you. You cannot do this on your own. What would be some more steps that we need to consider?
So think about mapping out the ecosystem. And when I say map out the ecosystem, I mean, which conferences are the types of conferences you could potentially speak at regarding your particular content, right? And you look at those conferences and you make a list. In fact, I have a free spreadsheet that you can have, and that I've already kind of started all that for you, templated it, meaning. And you map out those conferences, and then you look who's speaking at those conferences, because those are your peers. Those are your colleagues, right? And so start to get a good handle on who they are and meeting them, and then map out your particular customers. And I do that by taking people through an exercise of customer avatars. And people in marketing, you guys know what that is. But if you haven't studied marketing, then you may not have ever heard that. It's really coming up with all the attributes that you can of your perfect customer to drive that revenue stream, right? And in fact, your perfect customer may in fact just be your handful of bosses and your competitors, the management level at your competitor companies, right? The people who might hire you. It could be, customers for the actual company, or it could be things like you want to get on stage at conferences. And so that's your ideal customer, quote unquote. And coming up with some attributes from them. What country or what part of the country do they live in? What language do they speak? What's their job, their sex, their marital status? Do they have kids? What education level? The more you know about your customer, the better you can tailor your message to them and that you can reach them.
Yes, yes. So thinking about speaking, because this is something that you said that you did, and you ended up on a lot of stages that really showcased your expertise and helped you continue to build that thought leadership. But someone that listened to the point where you mentioned, okay, go and have a look at who else is speaking on various stages and start to network with them. I mean, a great place to start would be on LinkedIn, wouldn't it? Or some of those online profiles to find out more. And so what did that look like for you as you started to recognize, well, these are some of the people that are also speaking on stages. They've got complementary topics. What was the steps that you took to be able to reach and start building those relationships?
I would go where they are. I'd find out where they're speaking, and I would either attend that. And in fact, I'm doing that tomorrow. There's a person who I want to meet that works at HTC Vive, because I'm working on some VR right now. And so he's speaking at a meetup, and I'm literally going there just to meet him.
Yeah.
The other way is I will reach out to conferences, and this is a little bit further in your career. You can do this. I would say, hey, I'm a professional speaker, but I will comp my fee for you guys because I like what you're doing and I would love to speak on stage. And if you can get yourself on stage, and that almost always works for me. They always are like, wait, we're saving $10,000? Yes, let's get her. They don't even end up looking at my videos probably.
Yeah.
But I will meet people that way. And I've done that when I wanted to meet someone who worked at the FDA, because I was working on a medical device. And I've done that because I wanted to meet someone who worked at Humana, which is a big health insurer here in the United States. And we're talking, this is the C-levels. And I'm meeting them because I get myself on stage literally just to meet them.
Yes. Wow. And the consequence of that is that you're building your thought leadership. So I love that. So really it's not just about the positioning and everything, but you're leveraging that to build thought leadership and relationships. Because one of the things, and I've done a number of podcast interviews on behalf of Women Speakers Association in the US, they're global too. But one of the things that I've learned, and I'd love you to speak to this too, that the speaking circuit is a close-knit community. And so you need to build these relationships with others and really treat that network. As we know, your network is your net worth. But you found that to be true too, to really leverage and nurture those relationships.
Yes. And one of the big tricks I used early in my career was volunteering. This is huge. This is so huge. So conferences, the people who decide on who goes on stage typically are the event organizers.
Yes.
So if you go and you volunteer for one of the events and you become good friends with the event organizers, guess who they're going to call when they need another speaker next time? And you build that relationship. But the bigger thing even is that I say either volunteer as the speaker manager, because then you meet every single one of the speakers and you get their emails and you communicate with them back and forth, or work the registration table. It's the only position of a conference where you meet everybody who walks in the front door, and you can take a photo of the attendee list so you can follow up on LinkedIn afterwards.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. So, one of the things that we mentioned earlier on, and I know that this is so true when you're building your thought leadership, it is foundation building and it is consistency and constancy over a long period of time. So the strategy that you're now building out, I mean, you continue to do that because it works so well. Just give someone, and I know this is like, how long's a piece of string, but this does not happen overnight, does it?
No.
There has to be strategy and there has to be intentional building of that, reaching out, following up. So over what period of time would you say from I'm setting my intention, I'm clear on where I want to be. Now I want to speak on these stages and be alongside these people and be seen that they are my peers. How long did that take?
For me, it took about 1.5 years before I was really taken very seriously. Like at the beginning, I got myself on some stages. I got some of my articles published. In fact, I hired a PR firm at the very beginning, even though I hadn't been published yet, to get me published in high-end journals.
Yes.
Right. And so, and even with that background, it still took about 1.5 years before I started seeing a lot of things pile in. And one of the biggest things that it was writing my book.
Yeah.
That
yes.
right there, because people think it's much harder than it is. And so, because most people are way too intimidated to write a book, it still has that huge cachet value. Yes. Someone says, oh, she wrote a book. No one's going to read it. Like maybe they didn't read it, but they just say, oh, if she wrote a book, she must be brilliant.
Yeah, it's so true. But I love the way that you've shared, and you're really giving people a time frame, because I think people give up too soon.
They do.
They really do. And, when you are building the connections and the level of expertise, I mean, every time you have a conversation with someone, every time you speak and you hear feedback, I think, and you mentioned earlier, and I want to just reemphasize this, it's knowing what is your audience, your ideal client, consumers, what is the feedback that you're getting? Because if I look back, say 2 or 3 years ago, when I started talking more, focusing on podcasting, how I'm positioning and framing it now is quite different, because the audience has said, this is what we're really struggling. Because I think sometimes when we are at that level of expertise, we forget where our audience was, then, and we can assume or presume that they're aware of that. And so, the feedback that we receive continues to shape, evolve, and enhance what we're talking about. Okay, so you've gotten on their lists and you're starting to be seen as those platform speakers. You've got your book and you're now getting the messages out there. What are some of the other steps around the consistency and getting that message out there that you did?
So, well, let me give you some tips and tricks, though, about the book, because I think that is probably one of the biggest things. So I tell people who are too worried about trying to write, say, a 150-page book. And by the way, you don't want to write more than that. It's about 30,000 words potentially nowadays for a business book, which is not that long. Mine is a little bit too long on the Thought Leader formula, a little bit outside of that. But really think about maybe writing a 20 or 30-page PDF. Right. And I want to tell you a story about how I coached a friend of mine into this, Monica, the same woman who helped me with my subtitle. She was like an actual artist, a painter artist, and she wanted to become known as an expert in blockchain. She got really into it. She educated herself. She knew everything. Then she's like, okay, well, how do I tell people I know everything? I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe you don't want to be a blockchain expert at blockchain conferences, because then you're duking it out with a whole bunch of other people who are trying to do the same thing you are. Why don't you do Blockchain 101? And you are the blockchain expert at all the other conferences that have 0 other blockchain speakers.
Yes.
And so she sat down. It took her 8 days. That's it, 8 days to write. And she ended up writing about 80 pages, but her goal was only 40. And it was Blockchain 101, because any of us can write the 101 of our own expertise and our own industry. So she sat down, she took my cover, switched out the photo for hers, switched out the words for her words, uploaded to Amazon. All you need to do is format it correctly, and it's a PDF. That's all you're doing. And bam, within 3 months, she was asked to speak at MIT.
Wow. Yeah.
I have chills when I say that.
Amazing. And I love the way that you've shared and reinforced for her that often we look at an industry and we say, well, there's so many people speaking up. There's no way that I can speak up against that level.
Yep.
But then what's a niche in that level? Now, if I think of podcasting, there's a lot of people that are now speaking of podcasting, but for me, I'm passionate about the service-based business owners, the business owners who want to build that thought leadership, that authority, and ultimately generate income and clients from that, which is a whole, kind of industry that I've lived and breathed and done. So I love the way you've reflected on that. And so what are some things that you did to help your friend Monica to be able to recognize and identify where she could position her expertise? Just a couple of things for people to consider, because this, again, can be hard to clarify, really getting into that niche, that honing down of that one area.
I would say if you're unsure of where to start with the 101. And maybe it's very, very niche. Like maybe you're an expert on a very specific type of artificial intelligence, right? Yes. But getting down to that 101 of that specific type of like machine learning or something. And because if you can explain it to a 12-year-old, or you can explain it to your great-grandmother or your grandmother, then you can get that point across to everyone who's outside the industry.
Yeah,
right?
I love that.
And that will really help you.
Yeah. Something else that you said earlier, and I think that can often give people an indication of where they can position themselves. Are you able to take that expertise, but then tie it to your story? Yes. You said you had about the medical industry and you really wanted to speak into that. So maybe someone has a personal story or a journey which opens them up to a demographic or an experience that a whole group of people are also struggling with, and you can bring your expertise to that industry. So what happened to Monica when she got that opportunity to speak? I'd imagine that was just the snowball effect.
It was just the beginning. It's been not quite a year for her. So this was last December she was writing it, and she published it, I think, right in January. And I mean, she's been all over the world now speaking at conferences. Investors have come to her to give her millions of dollars to fund her startup.
Wow.
I mean, her life is so dramatically different. And all she did was just focus for 8 days and make that decision, make that intention. She did it, got it uploaded, and bam. And any of you guys, you're welcome to take my cover and design and just switch out the photo and switch out the words and get it done the same way. So you don't even have to think about the design or anything like that.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's important. because the reason I have my face on both of my covers is because the odds are most people are not going to read your book. If you are lucky in today's world, if 500 people read your book.
Yeah.
That's huge, right? Like thousands is almost, maybe the top 15%. To get to 10,000, you're looking at really the top single digits % of authors out there. And so with that in mind, your most important part of your book is the cover.
Yeah.
And what are you selling? Are you selling the content inside of there, or are you selling you?
Yeah.
You are
and
selling
as you say,
you.
the end in mind, the goal is to position your knowledge so that you get an invitation to speak. Now, what I love about what you've said is that not everyone's going to read your book. However, I'm sure the people who are infinitely interested in what you have to say, and that the stages that you are speaking on are going to want to read your book and pass your message on to others and recommend you. And so I think the more that you're able to focus and niche and harness, that expertise to that area that you really want to focus on, they'll become your ambassadors for you, which I love. Well, we could continue to speak for the rest of the day and plot out, but just in finalizing, what are some other things that people need to consider as they're building their thought leadership? So now they're starting to speak on stages. What would be the next step for them to continue to do so that they can still continue to leverage off the momentum that they've been building?
So start to think about even further on, where do you want to take this, right? Do you want to get a promotion? Do you want to change companies, industries? Do you want to start a company? Do you want to become a professional speaker where you're getting $10,000 or $20,000 for a keynote and being flown around the world, right? So set that intentional goal, right? Because that's going to drive, now that you're already speaking, that's going to drive your next steps.
Yeah, so true. I think often people are not getting to that level because they've never really set that intention.
Yes.
I think we always need to have a goal or a vision and mission that is pulling us forward. It's driving us forward because, we continue to build. And sometimes it's because we haven't even thought of that. We haven't even set those expectations. And that's what you did really well. I love the way that you've really honed your message with your first book. You started to get that thought leadership and that presence as someone who knows their stuff. And then, of course, you were able to pivot into the area that you really wanted. And I think when you build that level of thought leadership and the community of people who really see you as this trusted advisor, someone who knows what they're talking about, you can then again you have to do it strategically. You can't all of a sudden say, well, one day I'm now this and this. You have to, there's steps in between that. But of course, when you've got that audience and that reputation, you can do that for sure. Listen, I would love to ask you one question. Hindsight is such a wonderful teacher. Looking back and knowing what you know now, would there be anything that you would do differently? Or would you say, look, you know what, everything I can see was mapped out sequentially? Would there be something
probably would have started earlier and not been, I was scared. I mean, I have to tell you, I was a terrible writer at that point. I hadn't been practicing. Writing is an actual skill that you have to create. You have to actually practice to get good at. So I was scared of writing. I had stage fright. I was like, wait, how is anyone going to take me seriously in healthcare? I had a BS in management. Like, I am a finance and business person, not a physician. And people in healthcare are typically like physicians, right? And I just sat down and I said, all right, you know what? I'm going to take a deep breath. I know I'm terrified. I know I'm not good at these things yet. I'm going to get good at them, and I'm going to practice them, and I'm going to take a deep breath, and I'm going to get up every day, and I'm going to set goals for myself. And that's how I kind of get past that.
Yes, brilliant. I love that. And how often is doubt, fear keeping us stuck? However, I'd imagine the lives that you have impacted through sharing your first story, and now, of course, you've got your second book. It's the people that you've been able to impact and the lives that you've been able to transform through giving them, hope and possibility that, hang on a second, I can do this as well. And now that they're impacting lives too. And I guess that's really what drives you forward and continuing to do what you do. I love that. How do people get in contact with you? What's the best way, Robin?
So I am the only Robin Farmanfarmaian in the universe. And
Yep.
so I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and my website is robinff.com. It's so easy to find me. You Google me and I'm there.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think there's nothing greater than to finish off the year 2019 and start off the new year 2020. We're thinking of the things that you've just shared, because I think moving forward, one of the things that can never be replaced is the human factor in many of the in many of the aspects. And so often we hear even of roles going overseas, maybe not even to robots or AI, but even people, different demographics, globally. And I think we now are in a global workforce, so you need to really focus on what makes me so crucial, that there is no way that my level of knowledge and skills can be outsourced to someone else. And I think we all need to consider what that is for us. And often it's your story, your journey, your character, your approach, which often we neglect to really define and bring out with intention. And that unique aspect of you is really what is going to make you different from everybody else. So thanks once again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun talking to you.